The Quinton and Partners law firm, as boardroom, was thick with tension as my grandfather, as lawyer, cleared his throat, preparing to read the deceased's last will and testament. The words that left his lips stunned everyone present. My entire estate, valued at $500 million, will pass into the hands of whoever can find the golden key. My cousin, Bryce, a self-proclaimed heir, sprang to his feet, his voice trembling with excitement. I'll turn over every rock in this state if I have to. While the rest of the Ashford family, like a pack of hungry vultures, scrambled to find treasure maps and metal detectors, I, more than anyone, understood Grandfather Cornelius' true intent. He wasn't one for meaningless games. This golden key was merely his final lesson, a meticulously planned test that, I suspected, would end with me making an emergency call from a bank vault. On that fateful morning, when the will was to be read, 47 members of the Ashford clan gathered in a luxurious conference room in the heart of Milwaukee. An October downpour hammered relentlessly against the panoramic windows, creating a somber atmosphere. The air conditioning system struggled desperately to combat the heat emanating from such a gathering of bodies. The room was filled with a peculiar cocktail of expensive cologne, nervous sweat, and the scent of antique leather chairs, whose cost likely exceeded my college tuition. At 23, with a teaching degree in hand, I sat modestly in a far corner of the room, squeezed between my parents. My father, Dennis, as always, wore his unchanging brown sports coat, which he had donned for every family gathering for the past 10 years. My mother, Grace, gently squeezed my hand, her wedding ring cool against my palm. We were the poor relations, the ones mentioned in Christmas cards but rarely invited to the family estate unless etiquette demanded it. Across the room sat Uncle Harlan, my father's older brother, who had joined Grandfather Cornelius in his pharmaceutical empire right after graduating from Harvard Business School. His impeccable Armani suit probably cost more than my father earned in a month teaching middle school science. Uncle Harlan constantly glanced at his phone, irritably muttering about missed important meetings. His wife, my Aunt Veronica, sat beside him, maintaining perfect posture, her diamond necklace sparkling with every breath. Their son, Bryce, my cousin, 2 years my senior, lounged casually in his chair as if he owned the place. He had been groomed from birth to lead the family corporation. Grandfather Cornelius had often said I had a knack for business. He repeated it to anyone who would listen at the memorial service 3 days prior. He claimed I reminded him of himself in his youth. Bryce, on the other hand, had an annoying habit of turning every conversation into a competition, one he always had to win. His sister Mallory, sitting next to him, held her phone ready, live streaming everything to her 200,000 followers. "Guys, you are literally witnessing history," she whispered into the camera. "The Ashford family fortune is about to be divided, and your favorite girl is front row." She had built her entire influencer career on her status as pharmaceutical aristocracy, posting sponsored content from various family estates. The lawyer, Mr. Quinton, stood at the head of the conference table. He was a short man with thick glasses who had handled my grandfather's affairs since before I was born. His hands trembled slightly as he held the will. Whether from age or nervousness, I couldn't say for sure. Behind him hung a portrait of Grandfather Cornelius, painted just a year ago, shortly before he received his grim diagnosis. Even in that oil painting, his eyes seemed to sparkle with the secret knowledge that had once brought him millions. "Before we begin," Mr. Quinton said, adjusting his glasses, "Mr. Ashford left specific instructions that every family member must be present for the reading of the will. I was asked to wait until everyone had arrived." We had to wait another 20 minutes for my cousin Derek to fly in from California, where he was running a failing startup that Grandfather had refused to fund. Aunt Nain arrived from her yoga retreat in Sedona, still wearing her meditation beads. The remaining chairs were filled by cousins I had met perhaps a couple of times in my life. Everyone tried to feign grief while mentally calculating their percentage of $500 million. A palpable tension hung in the room, like a taut string, with an astronomical fortune, $500 million, at stake. When there was no longer a single empty spot in the room, Mr. Quinton cleared his throat as if signaling the start. Everyone leaned forward, holding their breath. Mallory, like an experienced reporter, aimed her phone camera for the perfect shot. Uncle Harlan, forgetting all decorum, put away his gadget. Even my father, who always feigned indifference to money, straightened in his chair as if sensing something important. I, Cornelius James Ashford, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire estate, valued at approximately $500 million, including real estate, assets, investments, and liquid funds, to the family member who first finds the golden key. A pause, lasting only 3 seconds, was broken by an explosion of emotions that threatened to tear the family apart and reveal a truth no one could have imagined. But the chaos that erupted in the conference room was merely a prelude to what was to unfold in the coming hours. Uncle Harlan, as if awakening from a trance, was the first to recover. His face first turned crimson, then blue with rage. He jumped up so abruptly that he knocked over his chair. "This is absurd! A treasure hunt? My father built a pharmaceutical empire, not some damn amusement park." Mr. Quinton, with trembling hands, tried to restore order. "I apologize, there is more to the will. If I may continue reading." But no one was listening. Bryce was already frantically searching the internet for treasure hunting companies. Mallory, like a seasoned blogger, was shouting into her phone camera about the craziest plot twist in history, and her subscribers, like a swarm of agitated bees, flooded the comments with their theories about the key's location. Cousin Derek, wasting no time, was loudly discussing ground-penetrating radar equipment on the phone. Cousins, like participants in a reality show, huddled in groups, forming alliances. Only my father remained motionless, gazing at Grandfather Cornelius's portrait with an unreadable expression. "Of course he did," he muttered. "Even after death, Dad had to turn everything into a lesson." Mother, sympathetically squeezing his shoulder, said, "Dennis, we need to go. This isn't our battle." But I couldn't move, watching my family transform into something unrecognizable. These people, who had only recently sung Christmas carols together, celebrated weddings and birthdays, and supported each other at Grandfather's funeral, now looked at each other as rivals in a race where second place was tantamount to defeat. Mr. Quinton finally managed to shout over the noise. "The will states that the search begins immediately. Mr. Ashford left no clues, maps, or hints. The key could be anywhere on the properties or territories. The only condition is that it must be found by a blood relative or the spouse of an Ashford family member." "How do we even know this key exists?" Aunt Veronica shrieked, cutting through the chaos like a knife. "What if it's some cruel joke?" Quinton, like a magician, pulled a photograph from his briefcase. It showed a simple golden key about 2 inches long with the number 1408 engraved on it. Mr. Ashford had taken this photograph and had it notarized a week before his death. I can assure you the key exists. Uncle Harlan, like an alchemist, snatched the photograph, examining it as if it could reveal secret coordinates. "It's a safe deposit box key, First National Bank style from their old boxes. That narrows the search." "No," Bryce countered, zooming in on the image on his laptop screen, where he had somehow already uploaded it. "It could be a replica. Grandfather was too clever to make it that simple. The key could be buried anywhere, hidden on any of his properties." After those words, the meeting concluded, and family members, as if fleeing a fire, rushed out. Some headed straight for Grandfather, his mansion in Whitefish Bay. Others went to his downtown office building. Bryce was already on the phone with a private investigation firm, while Mallory, like a seasoned journalist, was pitching the story to her talent agency as a potential reality show. My parents and I were the last to leave the conference room. Mr. Quinton, looking utterly drained, was gathering his briefcase. After Grandfather Cornelius's funeral, my father received only an old briefcase from the attorney. According to the lawyer, Grandfather had described him as a man who chose happiness over wealth. My father sadly noted that it changed little. In silence, they returned to their modest 2-story home in Bayview, a working-class neighborhood that contrasted sharply with the luxury of Grandfather's estates. The house needed repairs, the roof needed replacing, the garage door stuck, and the kitchen still had its old 1970s linoleum. But it was their home, acquired without the help of Ashford money. That evening, while the rest of the family was likely dividing Grandfather's assets, they ate pot roast, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Suddenly, breaking the silence, the narrator remembered Grandfather's words about loyalty and how money reveals people's true character. Perhaps the meaning wasn't in finding the key, but in understanding who they truly were when vast sums of money were at stake. He didn't realize then how right he was and what consequences this revelation would bring to the family in the future. The treasure hunt gripped the Ashford family like an epidemic. Within 2 days of the will's reading, Uncle Harlan had hired 15 private detectives, tasking each with investigating different aspects of Grandfather's life. They meticulously analyzed property records, financial transactions, travel history, and even medical documents, desperate for any clue that might point to the Golden Key's location. At an emergency family meeting at Grandfather's mansion, Uncle Harlan argued that the key must be hidden in one of the 17 properties Grandfather owned across several states. Bryce took a different approach, hiring a specialized company called Ground Detection Services, which focused on finding lost treasures and artifacts. They arrived at the estate with metal detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and thermal imagers. One Sunday, the narrator watched from his car as they methodically destroyed the precious rose garden, scanning every inch of the ground for metal. One of the specialists shouted about a discovery, and Bryce immediately rushed over. After an hour of digging, all they found was an old septic tank lid. Similar scenes repeated many times over several weeks. Every bottle cap, old nail, or piece of scrap metal became a brief moment of hope, followed by disappointment. Mallory turned the treasure hunt into content, posting daily videos with titles like Day 12, Searching for My Inheritance, and We Searched Grandpa's Secret Room. Subscribers offered various theories, from sensible to absurd. Someone suggested the key might be hidden in Grandfather's coffin, and the narrator had to stop Bryce from filing a petition for exhumation. My father, upon hearing this, indignantly declared that Grandfather was probably rolling in his grave. Cousin Derek, convinced he could solve the mystery with technology, returned from California. He created a database of all the places Grandfather had ever visited, cross-referencing them with important dates in his life, such as his wedding anniversary, the opening day of his first pharmacy, and family birthdays. Aunt Nain hired a psychic named Madame Zelda, who claimed she could communicate with Grandfather's spirit. They held seances in Grandfather's study, burning sage and asking spirits to guide them to the key. The psychic constantly felt golden energy in different places, leading to new holes in walls and floors. The search for the inheritance transformed the Ashford family's life into a chaotic whirlwind of intrigue and suspicion, leaving deep scars on once strong family ties. It was particularly tragic to observe the metamorphosis that had occurred in Uncle Harlan. Formerly an aggressive businessman, he was now consumed by paranoia. After installing surveillance cameras around the entire perimeter of Grandfather's properties, he saw every family member as a potential thief of the coveted key. Not shying away from hiring private detectives, he tracked his relatives' every move, suspecting them of secret searches. "I'm sure Dennis has the key," he insisted, not holding back his words. "Father always had a soft spot for that loser. It's probably his way of securing a comfortable future for his good-for-nothing son." My father, of course, heard about these absurd accusations, but preferred to stay out of the escalating conflict. "Let him say what he wants," he snapped. "I haven't set foot in my father's house since the funeral, and I'm not about to start now." After 3 months of fruitless searching, family bonds were torn to shreds. Bryce, sparing no expense, spent over $200,000 from his trust fund on treasure hunters. Constant sick days and leaves of absence, necessary to coordinate the search operations, cost him his job at an investment firm. Unable to bear the burden of his obsession, his girlfriend left him, refusing to invest her savings in expensive search equipment. Mallory, on the other hand, managed to profit from the family drama, turning it into content for her blog. However, despite her growing popularity, she did not escape the fate of obsession. The idea of finding the key and capturing that moment on camera became her pervasive goal. During one live stream, when another lead proved false, she couldn't hold back tears. Sympathetic subscribers organized a GoFundMe campaign to help her hire her own search team. Soon, the sprawling family fractured into warring factions. Some were convinced the key was hidden in the ancestral estate in Vermont. Others leaned towards the theory that it was in Grandfather's office building. A group of cousins put forth a theory about the pharmaceutical warehouses. The fear of revealing their findings made them cease all communication with each other. Amidst the general madness, the narrator remained faithful to his Sunday rituals. Every Sunday, without exception, he went to Riverside Cemetery to honor his grandfather's memory, He brought fresh flowers, pulled weeds surrounding the gravestone, and shared his thoughts with him about the chaos his will had sown. "They're destroying everything you built, grandfather," he said on one cold February day, watching his breath turn into clouds of vapor. "Not the business, but the family. Is this what you wanted, to see who we truly are when money is involved?" In response, only the wind rustled through the bare tree branches. Yet, he felt as if grandfather was listening, patiently waiting for someone to understand the true lesson he was trying to teach. By the 9th month of the frantic treasure hunt, the Ashford family was on the brink of complete collapse. Uncle Harlan's paranoia had reached a critical point. He sued 3 family members, accusing them of theft and fraud, claiming they had found the key and were hiding it. His lawyers petitioned the court to declare grandfather mentally incompetent at the time of writing the will, arguing that no sane person would dispose of their fortune in such a manner. Bryce had completely lost control. After squandering nearly $500,000 on treasure hunters, archaeologists, and even a team specializing in searching for Nazi gold, he developed an alcohol problem. His apartment had become a mad detective's headquarters, cluttered with maps, photographs, and documents related to grandfather's life. The walls were covered with red threads connecting various locations and dates. Concerned about his condition, his ex-girlfriend called the narrator's mother, fearing a nervous breakdown. "I know I'm close," Bryce declared during the narrator's visit. His eyes were bloodshot, and his once impeccable hair was a tangled mess. "Grandfather had a cabin in Michigan no one knows about. I found the papers for it in his old documents. The key must be there." Mallory, in turn, faced different but no less serious problems. Her subscriber count had surpassed 1 million, and she received a tempting offer for a reality show from a streaming service. However, the constant pressure to find the key on camera was taking a destructive toll on her psyche. She started taking anxiety medication, gradually increasing the dosage. To pique audience interest, she resorted to hiring actors to fake sensational discoveries. But the deception was quickly exposed when one of them was recognized from a commercial. The family, gripped by the feverish search, had depleted their financial reserves. Cousin Derek, sparing no expense, purchased costly equipment, maxing out his credit cards. Aunt Nain, hoping for a miracle, squandered her retirement savings on psychics, mediums, and even a dowsing specialist who swore he could find anything with magical rods. The protagonist's parents watched the unfolding events with sorrow. "This is what your grandfather feared," my mother said at dinner. "He always said, money doesn't change people, it merely reveals their true nature." The somber date approached, the anniversary of grandfather's death, October 15th. For a year, the hero of the story had visited his grave every Sunday. In all weather, be it rain, snow, or heat, he unfailingly came. The cemetery caretaker, old Carl, recognized him by sight. "You again?" He would nod, greeting him with flowers and a thermos of coffee. Order is order. The protagonist had developed his ritual. He cleaned debris from the headstone, pulled weeds, trimmed the grass around the edges, and placed fresh flowers in the vase. While working, he talked to his grandfather about everything: his job as a 5th-grade teacher, his girlfriend Rachel, whom he met at a bookstore, his ordinary life, while his family descended into chaos. "You know, grandfather," he said one day in early October, "I'm the only one who's visited you all year. Uncle Harlan stopped by once to look for the key in your flowers. Bryce brought a metal detector, but no one else comes just to visit." A week before the anniversary, he decided to do something special. At Romano's Deli, he ordered grandfather's favorite, pastrami on rye with mustard and a pickle. At his favorite coffee shop, he got a dark roast coffee and brought the chess set grandfather had given him for his 16th birthday, with hand-carved jade and ivory pieces bought in Hong Kong. October 15th was a perfect autumn day. The maples in the cemetery blazed crimson and gold, and the air was crisp. The hero set up the chessboard on grandfather's grave, using the headstone as a table. He played a game, moving both black and white pieces, employing the strategies grandfather had taught him. "Remember the Sicilian defense?" he said, moving the pieces. "You said it was like life, aggressive but purposeful. You have to be willing to sacrifice pawns to protect the king. But the best players, you said, know how to be patient, make quiet moves no one notices until checkmate." He finished the game by promoting a pawn, just as grandfather had taught him. The weakest piece becomes the strongest, he said, smiling at the memory of the lesson. That's the beauty of chess, kid, Grandfather would say. Anyone can become strong if they keep moving forward. As he packed up the chess set, the hero accidentally brushed against something rough under the ledge of the headstone. At first, he thought it was just dirt or moss, but looking closer, he saw a strip of industrial tape, skillfully painted to match the granite. His heart stopped as he peeled off the tape. There it was, a small golden key with the number 1408 engraved on it, exactly like the photograph Mr. Quinton had shown a year ago. It had been there all this time, enduring all the whims of Wisconsin weather, under the headstone he had cleaned every Sunday for a year. Attached to the key was a laminated note, "To my faithful visitor, K.A." The hero knelt, the key trembling in his hand. The metal was cold but felt alive, vibrating with the realization of its significance. $500 million. A sum capable of changing everything, of freeing them from worries about a leaky roof, his father's old car, his mother's medical bills after surgery, paying off student loans, but also of destroying what was left of the family. He immediately called his parents. His mother answered on the second ring. "I found it," he said, barely audible. "Mom, I found the key." Silence hung on the line. Then his father's voice came through the speaker. "Where are you?" "At the cemetery. It was under his headstone. It was here all this time." "Don't tell anyone," his father urged. "Come home. We need to think this through." But he couldn't leave without understanding everything. He sat by Grandfather's grave, holding the key, trying to understand what he had wanted. The note was clear. Grandfather knew it would be him. "To my faithful visitor." Grandfather was counting on his consistency, his loyalty, on him coming, even when it seemed pointless. A sense of illogic and aimlessness seemed to envelop the narrator. He returned home as if floating in a restless dream. His parents were waiting for him in the living room, the curtains tightly drawn. They sat around the old coffee table, and the safe deposit box key lay between them like an unexploded ordnance. "You could have kept it a secret?" his mother whispered. "Waited a few months and found it somewhere else." "Or we can call Quinton right now," his father retorted sharply. "End this nonsense before it gets worse." But something bothered the narrator. "A safe deposit box key," he murmured, turning it in his fingers. "Box number 1408 at First National Bank, Grandfather's bank. There's something in that box he wanted me to discover." "The money is probably in an investment account," his father suggested. "The key is just a symbol." But the narrator knew his grandfather better. Every action of his was imbued with deep meaning. The next morning, he put on his only decent suit and headed to the main branch of First National Bank in the heart of the city. The building was the epitome of old Milwaukee money, marble columns, brass fittings, and hushed voices from the patrons. He asked to meet the manager, presenting the key. Mr. Jacobson, a tall man with silver hair, examined it carefully. "Box 1408. Yes, it's one of our oldest boxes. It belonged to Mr. Ashford since 1963. You'll need to show identification and sign the visitor log." He led the narrator through 3 rows of massive armored doors, each appearing thicker than the last. The vault resembled a movie set. Hundreds of brass boxes lined the walls. Box 1408 was in the far corner, one of the largest, at floor level. With trembling hands, the narrator inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked, and the sound seemed to echo throughout his life. The box was surprisingly heavy. He had to carry it with both hands to a separate viewing room. "Mr." Jacobson left him alone, quietly closing the door. The narrator took a deep breath and opened the lid. The first thing that caught his eye was money. Stacks and stacks of $100 bills, tied with ribbons dated from the 1960s. There was at least $1 million in cash, possibly more. But this was no ordinary money. Each bundle bore initials, VD, and monthly dates stretching back decades. Beneath the money lay a leather journal, its pages yellowed with time. Grandfather's neat handwriting filled every line, beginning with an entry from 1961. The narrator began to read, and his blood ran cold. "Vincent D'Angelo came into my pharmacy today. He knows I'm skimming from the till to pay for Maria's cancer treatment. He's threatening to report me to the police if I don't agree to help him. I have no choice. My daughter is dying. The entries continued, each documenting a descent into darkness. Vincent. Vinny the Diamonds D'Angelo, a notorious Milwaukee crime boss, had turned grandfather's first pharmacy into a money-laundering front. When Vincent supposedly died in 1971, the truth was different. He faked his death, and grandfather was forced to help him hide, paying monthly protection money for 50 years. The last item in the box made the narrator reach for his phone to call emergency services. Fresh photographs of Vincent D'Angelo's real grave, dated just a month before grandfather's death, and a USB drive labeled "Complete Evidence for the FBI." The narrator sat in that cold bank vault for about 20 minutes before his fingers could dial 911. When the operator answered, his voice sounded more confident than he felt. "I need to report a crime. Several crimes committed 60 years ago. I'm at the First National Bank on Wisconsin Avenue. Please send detectives here, and you'll need to contact the FBI." Within an hour, the bank was swarming with law enforcement. FBI agents in crisp dark suits, local detectives, forensic accountants, and even someone from the Treasury Department. They seized the money, the journal, the USB drive, every single piece of evidence. Agent Sarah Coleman, who led the investigation, spent about 3 hours with the narrator as he recounted in detail how he found the key and what he discovered in the box. "Your grandfather meticulously documented everything," she told him later. "Every payment, every threat, every crime Vincent committed while he was presumed dead. This is the largest cold case ever cracked in Wisconsin." The news broke the next morning like a thunderclap. Pharmaceutical magnate's dark secret, Cornelius Ashford's hidden life steeped in extortion. The wave of information engulfed every news agency in the country. The Federal Bureau of Investigation revealed shocking facts. Vincent D'Angelo had faked his own death to escape justice for murder and racketeering. It turned out that grandfather had been forced to aid his disappearance and then, for half a century, paid him protection money. The pharmaceutical empire, once our pride, was built on the shaky foundation of fear. Uncle Harlan was crushed by the news, as if struck by lightning. Not physically, but emotionally. He couldn't hold back tears at the family meeting, convened a week later. "Dad carried this burden alone," he insisted, "all these years, sharing it with no one. He protected us from this nightmare." Bryce voluntarily entered rehabilitation. The realization that grandfather was not an infallible businessman but a victim of circumstances gave him internal permission to acknowledge his own weakness. "I spent a year chasing money that was never truly ours," he confessed during a visit. "Grandfather would have been horrified by who I became." Mallory deleted all her treasure hunt videos and took a break from social media. She sought therapy and eventually returned to school to become a social worker. "I want to help people who are trapped like grandfather was," she explained, "those who feel like they have no way out." For 3 months, FBI forensic accountants meticulously separated grandfather's illicit gains from his legitimate earnings. Even after confiscating everything connected to Vincent D'Angelo, grandfather's legitimate businesses had generated nearly $100 million. He was a brilliant entrepreneur, even under the burden of extortion. It was then that Mr. Quinton presented a second will. Grandfather had given it to federal authorities many years ago, with instructions to open it only if someone found the key and made what he called the right choice. The will stated that the clean money would be equally divided among all family members, but with conditions. The person who found the key would become the executor, and each family member would only receive their share after presenting a plan for how they would use it to create light from darkness. The family gathered for the first time in a year to discuss their plans. Uncle Harlan expressed a desire to fund a legal aid society for small business owners who were victims of extortion. Bryce proposed creating a fund for families affected by organized crime. Mallory planned to create a documentary series about victims fighting their oppressors. Even the cousins who had spent all their energy searching for the key offered ideas for charitable work, business projects aimed at helping others, ways to turn our tainted legacy into something bright. My parents initially refused their share. "We've done without the Ashford money for so long," my father said. But I managed to convince them to accept it and establish a scholarship fund for students whose parents chose careers in education over wealth. Let grandfather's money help raise more teachers, I said, more people who choose purpose over profit. As for me, I used my role as executor to ensure everyone fulfilled their plans, but I also kept something for myself, the key. Not for its monetary value, but as a reminder. I keep it on my desk so I see it every day. I still visit grandfather's grave every Sunday. The headstone was replaced with a new one, bearing the truth. Cornelius James Ashford, loving father and grandfather. He bore his burden with dignity and protected those he loved. Now, when I pour coffee on his grave, I tell him about the good his money is finally doing, the families who received help, the students who were educated, the victims who received support. The last time I visited, I brought my son, born just a month ago. This is your great-grandfather, I told him, though he was too young to understand. He wasn't perfect, but he had the strength to document the truth, knowing that someday someone would have the courage to reveal it. He taught me that a true inheritance isn't money. It's the choice to do what's right, even if it comes at a great cost.